Hey guys, what's up? It's Joseph Quick here, and today I just real quickly want to go over what exactly a bioactive enclosure is, or as close to a bioactive enclosure as you can get. So, whenever you hear bioactive, you may be thinking of like your garden or something that's going to take extensive work or something along those lines. Or in all actuality, what a bioactive enclosure is an enclosure that requires little to no assistance from you. So, what I mean by that is so let's say you have your enclosure set up with tropical soil, Zoom Med tropical soil, and you put in isopods and springtails. You put in a little bit of terrarium grass. That's a bioactive enclosure right there. But now, if you also hook up a misting system, and you just leave it as is, and you just fill up that tank to the misting system, and like you have no animal in it, you're just letting it grow and let it be as is. Maybe you're waiting for an animal to come in, or you're just getting it set up. That's what a bioactive enclosure is. Bioactive is just as little help from you as possible. So, but there are also other variations. So, like some enclosures, you don't need to have isopods and springtails, such as trying to think, as an axolotl enclosure. Let's go with that as an example. So you just put the axolotl in your fish tank with your other fish that stay closer up to the top. You maybe have a few snails or they can't eat or things like that, animals like that, then you have a bioactive enclosure. And same with fish. So all you have to do is just drop in the food. Drop in the food and that's it. And that's it. That's all you have to do. Is just drop in the food. Everything else is taken care of. So then you have a bioactive enclosure at that point in time. But at the same time, some enclosures require a little help. So your bioactive enclosure, you may be thinking, oh, this is the best bioactive enclosure in the world until you notice a little bit of mold. So at times you may just have to go, dang it, and clean out the mold. Or sometimes it gets so severe to where you have to take everything out. And that is actually a problem that I am starting to run into with my Savannah monitor that was in my last video. My Savannah monitor feeding video. Savannah monitor feeding video. I'm starting to run into a slight mold problem. So, but the reason I'm bringing that up is because it's not bioactive enclosure, and I know that. So that is what I. So that is why I believe that I'm having a mold problem, because mold grows in a hot and humid environment. So some areas of the United States, such as I am now in southern Arkansas, it is hot and humid during the summer. So then you run into the mold problem. you run into that problem to the point where you are you're stuck in a conundrum of you are in a location where you cannot get isopods and springtails. Isopods and springtails, and you don't have an abundance to substrates, as I'm just saying, as I do. So then you have to go out, and so then you have to make the decision. Do I either A, get a bunch of springtails and isopods from offline and put them in, or option B, do I spend a lot more money on getting new substrate nearly every 2 weeks, every month? So then you're stuck in that little conundrum. But so I've seen other YouTubers go over what a bioactive enclosure is, but they go into it with so much detail. At the end of it, you're thinking to yourself, well, what sorry about that. It's about 10:30 at night. But by the time the video's over with, you're thinking to yourself, what is a bioactive enclosure? So the reason I bring that up is because of that reason. And I'm trying to put on a third grade level and give you guys some examples. Now, at one point I did have a bioactive enclosure. And that was with, I'm trying to think of what it was with. It was with my first ball python. His enclosure was bioactive. Bioactive as can be. But also at the same time, sometimes you'll have an animal that likes to be in one corner and just across the glass. So then you got to clean the glass off. But that's still very little help. But in my opinion, a bioactive enclosure doesn't need to be so intricate and so planned out. And some people, they have made their enclosures so bioactive for their, let's say, there's fat-tailed geckos, or their for their frogs, or salamanders, or cresties, or giant day geckos, or something else along those lines, to where they'll put in like mealworms and crickets and dubias, and all that just grows in it, to where all you have to do then is just put the water in. So then you then have no point in interacting with your animal, because they have everything that they need minus the calcium. So, but I mean, like, that's just an example, and I've seen that before. I've seen an enclosure so intricate that it amazes you at how much planning and how much money they put into their enclosure by putting their food in and doing this and that, this and that, this and that, this and that, this and that. And then you're thinking to yourself, what? And most of the time it's on these custom enclosures. But once you do that, you may just forget about it. because you're not having to go over and check on it, or you're just going over once, or you're going over to it 4 times a week just to fill up the water, or you've got a giant tank that's set off to the side that you then fill that up, that goes into a waterfall or something like that. To me, that on one hand I can understand because you put so much money into it, but at the same time you need to enjoy it. You but so back onto what this video is about. What exactly bioactive enclosure is. Short and sweet. You do very little to no work other than feeding it, doing spot major uh, checks for unhealthy uh, bowel movements, things like that, and cleaning out the water, putting fresh water in. And if your animal requires high humidity, you're misting it once or twice a day. So that's what a bioactive enclosure is and why it's important, and why I personally recommend getting a bioactive enclosure. So that was the video. And if you're in an area that you can't find any isopods or springtails, it's expensive to get them offline, because if you get them offline, you're getting colonies. You're not just getting like 40 or 50. No, you're getting like 100 to 250 of each. And it, on one hand, I can see why, because if you're needing it that bad most of the time, it's because you did a custom enclosure. But at the same time, you're still spending a lot of that money, but you don't know how many of them are going to survive the trip. So that's one alternative that you can have. But if you do live in an area, or you live close to an area that sells isopods and springtails, or you can find a store that does, I would recommend going there and getting them. But it's one of those things of hit and miss. Because where I'm at, I can get super worms, mealworms, giant mealworms, crickets, and that's it. That's all I can get where I'm at. And everything else I need to get or want to get for my animals, I have to get offline. So I'm stuck. But alrighty. Well, guys, I know that this was a little bit of a rant. I'm sorry about that. But remember, always stay prepared. Always stay prepared. And be ready for anything.